Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Elena and here I talk about books. In June, I read these 8 books plus 2 on my Kindle, and 3 of them were 5-star reads. I'm actually surprised with myself for having read 10 books because it was a really busy month. June is the last month of school, so we had all of the end of school stuff. It's also recital season, so both my kids had their dance recital and had all the practices and dress rehearsals and all that. And then at the end of the month, we went on a road trip. I get pretty carsick, so I don't read in the car. In June, I wanted, a lot of variety with my reading, so I read books from 6 different genres. Let's start with the thrillers. The first book I read was The Man Made of Smoke by Alex North. This is a serial killer thriller. It was a pretty fun read. It's about a criminal profiler who witnessed a crime as a child, and now he's grown up and he's gone back to his hometown where his dad has passed away under suspicious circumstances. It took me a few tries to get into the book. I just couldn't get past the first 2 pages. I kept reading them and then being like, no, I'm not in the mood for this. Once I finally got through that, it was pretty good, it was fun, but it wasn't a 5-star read for me. I would say it's a solid 4-star, and it's great if you enjoy mystery and serial killer stuff. The second thriller that I read was The Tenant by Freida McFadden. This is the new Freida McFadden book. Honestly, I wouldn't have picked it for myself. I'm not a big Freida McFadden fan, but one of the book clubs that I'm in took a vote and this was the pick. So I did read it, but I didn't enjoy it. I feel like Freida McFadden books just feel so quick and low effort. There's no vibe, there's no setting, they're so formulaic. I saw the twist coming from a million miles away. It's about a couple that lives together, and when the guy loses his job, they have to take a tenant in order to keep their place. Then things kind of start to go downhill and a lot happens from there. It's fast-paced and it's an easy read, so if that's what you're looking for, it's fine. But my brutally honest review of it is it's a 2-star read. I wonder if thrillers are maybe just not my cup of tea anymore. I've read a couple that were great, and maybe they were great because it was early on in my thriller journey. Now I'm really starting to feel like if you've read one, you've read them all. I'm not even trying to guess what's going to happen. It's just so painfully obvious to me that when the twist finally comes, it's just not exciting. Let's move on to fantasy. The first fantasy book that I read this month was Upon a Starlit Tide by Kell. This was from my Aardvark box. I initially bought this book because I love the cover. It looks so cool, I love the style of the art, and I love mermaids. So I was excited to read a fantasy book about mermaids. I would say this cover is both good and bad. It's good because it's a beautiful cover and it got me to buy the book. Bad because I had certain expectations, like I thought this book was going to be full of mermaids. In reality, the first half of this book is more so historical fiction. I do a more detailed review of this book in my most recent Read With Me for a Week video. But essentially, I think I would have really loved it if I went into it knowing that it was historical fiction in the beginning. The second half does have a lot more magic, fantasy, action, which really saved the book for me. Overall, I really enjoyed the read. It was different, it was interesting. I loved the setting, it was so beautiful. And the writing is fantastic. Solid 4-star read for me. The second fantasy book that I read in June was the new V.E.Schwab book, Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. This is my first book by this author. This was a highly anticipated June release, and it's about vampires. I think there was a lot of hype about it being about lesbian vampires specifically, but I would say that the focus is less on their sexuality and more so on them being vampires. This was a really cool read. It really pulls you in from the beginning. The ending is really action-packed. The middle was a little bit slow for me. It follows the story of 3 women that are vampires, how they got to where they are, and you know from the beginning that eventually those stories are going to merge because there aren't going to be 3 parallel, completely separate stories throughout the book. However, it took just way too long for those stories to merge. Overall, I liked the read because it was different and it was really well written. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil gets 4 stars. Next, we're going to move on to my favorite genre, which is Romantasy. So the first Romantasy book that I read was The Never List by Jade Presley. When I read this, I was in the mood for something smutty, and it delivered. The Never List is about a girl who accidentally ends up being picked as the mate to 4 princes. She is their mate both individually and in different combinations. So they're all sharing her. Sometimes you just need a little reverse harem in your life. I would say that there is not a lot of world building and magic. It's there, but it's just not super prevalent or super developed or complex like in other Romantasy books. But there is a lot of tension and spice. I really like 3 out of the 4 princes. One of them was like just a little bit cringy, I think. I won't say which one, and I'm curious to see if you agree with me if you've read this book. I liked this as a reverse harem because sometimes in reverse harems there could be a lot of guys and it's kind of hard to tell the difference between them. But this book does a really good job of separating the 4 guys into different parts of the story so you can really get to know them individually. This was my Spicy Mom Book Club pick of the month. We haven't yet met up to discuss it. Typically for the book club picks, after we finish reading the book, we do mark it as read on Goodreads, but we don't put any ratings or reviews because we don't want to sway the opinions of any other members of the book club. And we just want to talk about it when we meet up. We haven't yet met up to discuss it, but I'm excited to chat about this with the girls. My second Romantasy pick of the month was Metal Slinger by Rachel Schneider. I ate this up. I couldn't put this book down. A couple of my friends had already read it, and they were speaking really highly of it, so I was excited to get started. Before reading Metal Slinger, be forewarned, there's a cliffhanger ending and book 2 hasn't even been announced yet. That is the worst part about this book. Actually, that's not the worst part about this book. That's one of the worst things about this book. The worst part about this book is that it is devastating, infuriating, and I was outraged. I can't say any more without any spoilers, but I will say that I love the world building here. It has all my favorite tropes like forced proximity, fated mates, enemies to lovers. This was a 5+ star read, and I cannot wait for book 2. The next category we have is magical realism. This is a genre that I've been leaning towards more and more lately. I've really enjoyed some of the Ashley Poston books like Dead Romantics and 7 Year Slip, but when I read The Other Side of Now by Paige Harbison, I was like, whoa, is magical realism one of my favorite genres? I have a more detailed review of this book on my channel, and I would highly recommend you check that out because I go into a little bit more detail about the plot without any spoilers. Essentially, to keep it short here, it's about a girl named Meg who's an actress, and she accidentally stumbles into her alternate timeline, where one decision changes the course of her life. In this alternate timeline, her best friend that had died when they were younger is still alive. This is one of those books that just stays with you forever. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I still can't stop thinking about it. I've recommended it to everyone. It's really beautifully written and it's emotional in a really feel-good kind of way. This book is not very long. I actually read it in one day. I stayed up very late. It's about friendship, love, gratitude, our own personal growth, self-fulfillment, ambition, about how little decisions that we make matter. I loved this book. Solid 5 stars. It's one of my top reads of the year. Next up, we have The Names by Florence Knapp. Maybe the issue here is that I had really high expectations based on the reviews. It's always best to go into books blind when you really have no idea what to expect, and you don't have other people's opinions in your head. The concept of The Names is a solid 5 stars. It's about a woman who has a baby, and she is choosing a name for the baby. Then the story splits into 3 separate timelines, and in each one, the baby has a different name. The name leads him to have a completely different life, and it changes the course of the family. I think it's a really good take on how our name is such a big part of our identity. It makes me think about how choosing the names for my own kids was such a big decision and potentially could shape who they are, and maybe they'd be completely different if I had gone with my second option for their names. Before starting the names, please make sure that you check the trigger warnings. Domestic violence is a huge part of this story and can be tough to read. I think at the end of the day, despite the concept being so interesting, the characters just weren't likable or relatable, so it was hard for me to get through this book. That's why I've rated it at 3 stars. Last but certainly not least, we have Romance. Left of Forever by Tara DeWitt was one of my Aardvark picks for June. I've never gotten an Aardvark romance pick before, so I was curious to see what it would be like. I believe this is book 2 in a series, but they're interconnected standalones, so I didn't read book 1, and I don't think you need to have prior knowledge of that to read this one. I thought this was a really refreshing romance. I loved that the characters were a little bit older, they're in their 30s. It's a divorced couple who had had a child when they were teenagers. They were married for a long time, and then things didn't work out and they had been divorced for 5 years. After dropping their son off at college, they decide to give their relationship another shot. The characters in this book are complex, and I loved that they're already so deeply connected. They've been together for so many years, they have this really personal, intimate knowledge of each other. I wouldn't say I'm somebody who leans towards second chance romances, I'm a believer in if it didn't work out the first time, why would it work out the second or third time? But in this particular case, I love the character growth, the work that they do, how they learn from their mistakes. It's a really beautiful story. And it's spicy. I finished the month with Caught Up by Navessa Allen. This is book 2 in a series. The first book is called Lights Out. These are interconnected standalones. You don't necessarily need to read the first one to read the second one, but I would recommend it. First of all, let's talk about this cover. This really makes it look like it's a biker romance. And while the main character does have a motorcycle, it's such a minor part of the story. So if you're looking for a biker romance, this isn't it. This is definitely more so a mafia romance. This is a dark romance. There is voyeurism, stalking, a good amount of spice. I thought overall it was a really fun read. I really enjoyed it. I think it's really tough to follow a book like Lights Out. Lights Out is a 5-star read. The main thing that makes Lights Out better than Caught Up is the male main character. Josh, in the first book, is just funny and sweet and a more likable character overall. In the second book, the main character is named Junior, or Nico, and he's fine as a character, but if you compare him to Josh, he's just not as good, he's not as likable. Essentially, the book is about Junior, who's part of a mafia family, and he's been obsessed with his high school girlfriend, Lauren, for 10 years. She's a cam girl, and he's her #1 fan. It kind of follows their story on them reconnecting after all these years, and there were a lot of elements to the story that I really liked. I thought it was a great read. I give it 4 stars because it's hard to not compare it to Lights Out, which was significantly better. It doesn't feel like a very original story, and it doesn't stand out in my mind. I would say it's a fantastic palate cleanser. I didn't DNF any books this month, although I was very close to DNFing The Tenant by Freida McFadden. I pushed through because it was our book club pick, and I wanted to make sure that I actually read the book so we can talk about it. Everyone in the book club had last-minute things come up, so we didn't actually end up meeting up and talking about it. But I've already said all I had to say on here, and there isn't much else to add. There were 2 books that I started in June that I haven't yet finished. The first I only have the dust jacket of here because I have the actual book next to my bed, but it's The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I took a real risk with this one because it's totally not my style. It's not up my alley in the slightest. I think Joe Abercrombie mostly appeals to men, but I thought I'd give it a shot. I'm about a quarter through the book now, and I would say it's much more vibe than plot. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it just doesn't make it a page-turner for me. The book is about Brother Diaz and his band of misfits on an adventure. The band of misfits includes a vampire, a werewolf, an elf, a magician. So it is pretty cool. The characters are really cool, and I love the setting. So I'm just slowly getting through it whenever the mood strikes. I believe this book is supposed to be a movie, directed by James Cameron. So I'd be curious to finish reading the book and potentially watch the movie. I also started The Compound by Rawle. This is also a new release, and I'm listening to it as an audiobook. The description of this on Goodreads states that it's kind of like a Love Island meets Lord of the Flies, and it's my next month's book club pick. It's about contestants on a dating show on this compound in the middle of the desert. They have to complete these group challenges and individual challenges in order to get gifts like clothing, food, hairbrushes, shoes, those kinds of things. The group challenges are done as a group, and the personal challenges have to be done by each individual, and they're private. Individuals cannot say that they're doing something because it's a challenge. I love that concept because it's like people are doing these weird things, and you don't know if it's because it's a personal challenge and they're just doing it to get something out of it, or if they're just doing those things out of their own free will. I started listening to this as an audiobook with my husband on our road trip. So when the kids were sleeping in the car or in the evening before we went to sleep, we would listen to it together. We're about 30% in now. I asked if he wants to continue and he said yes, so that's why I haven't yet finished it. I guess my husband enjoys other activities that don't include reading all the time. So I'm going to be patient and listen to this book at a regular pace. But things are just starting to get a little bit more interesting in the book, and I'm curious to see where it goes. Let me know if you've read any of these and what you thought of these books. Make sure you subscribe so we can read and chat about books together.